From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. How are you? Let's start with some light items first. SNL, Saturday Night Live, wrapped up its 49th season over the weekend. So that means the clock is ticking now. They're on the clock, as they say in the NFL draft. Season 50 is coming up, which people have been talking about for a long time. Will Lorne Michaels retire after the 50th season? He has said that he might. He's said that in interviews. I've seen other interviews of people who know him well, Seth Meyers among them, who don't believe it. They say, no, he's not going anywhere. So we'll see. And, of course, if he did go, who would be his successor? Seth Meyers' name, I think, has been raised there also, as has Tina Fey. Who else? I forget now. John Mulaney was my choice. I think he should take over the reins of SNL. I've been a fan of SNL since its very beginning. I watched the very first episode with George Carlin. And I've always been a defender because it's kind of funny, actually. But depending on how old you are, the last time you liked the show was the last time it was funny. And it's when you were probably in your teens. And if it was Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy, then you say, oh, it was the last time they were funny. Or if it was Adam Sandler, it's the last time they were funny. It's really ridiculous. It's always been hit or miss, and there have been some casts better than others, sure. But I've always been a defender. It's like, come on. Try writing 90 minutes of comedy. Well, it's not 90 minutes. The show is 90 minutes. With commercials and music, it's less than an hour probably. But still, try writing an hour of comedy per week. Let's see how you do. See how many of your funny friends from the bar you can get together to commit to write, not only writing, but writing and performing an hour of comedy every week. Let's see how you do. Come on. So I've always been a defender. Now, I say all this because it's been actually kind of a rough year. There have been some shows where I just sit with kind of slack-jawed, like, what is happening? I don't understand how anybody thinks this is funny. It's been kind of a rough year with great moments in between. Of course, like I said, it's hit and miss. The best, if you didn't see it, go to YouTube or wherever you find your clips. SNL had one of the best commercial parodies they've ever done on fast fashion and how it's made with slave labor and shoddy materials and made with lead and other toxins. It's a really very nice little piece of satire with an extremely strong point of view, which good satire should have. Yeah, it's pretty brutal. It's pretty brutal. So it happened on the final episode of season 49. If you want to check it out, I recommend it. Pet peeve I have to mention. Like Lorne Michaels needs my advice. When straight actors try to do comedy, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Oftentimes it doesn't because they're playing the joke. That means the audience is very aware that they are aware that it's a joke, and they're kind of mugging and being kind of coy and like, aren't I funny is the subtext. As opposed to, and the ironic thing here is that a good straight actor should be able to do this. They just need to be coached. You need to coach them. You need to direct them. Do the scene the way you would using your acting skills. Don't mug and have the subtext be, look at me, aren't I funny? That ruins the joke. That's called playing the joke. You don't want to play the joke. You want to play the scene. You want to play the character. And if the writing is any good, it'll work. So, it's the fatal flaw of most, the straight dramatic actors who try to host SNL and do comedy. Most of them fail for this reason. They don't understand comedy. And so directors, Lorne Michaels, you guys direct them, teach them, coach them not to play the joke, but to play the character, play the scene, and trust the writers. So there you go. Little SNL back and forth for you. Season 50 starts. The countdown begins next October, I guess, usually when they premiere. I'm sure they'll have a big lineup of guests for the season, a big season premiere, a big season finale. It's going to be a big deal. We'll see how they live up to that pressure. What's going on in the news? Saw an interesting item about falling birth rates. This is from BBC. How should countries deal with falling birth rates? And this whole article talks about falling birth rates as though it's a problem. With birth rates continuing to decline in both nations, talking about the UK and the US, it is tempting to use the time bomb term. However, it is greatly disliked by demographers, the experts that study population change, blah, 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 not important. The scale of the future problem is immense, the article says. For a country in the developed world to increase or maintain its population, it needs a birth rate of 2.1 children per woman on average. So that's the replacement rate. Every woman in a developed country has to have 2.1 children on average. So if you're having 0, that means your neighbor has to have 4. Or if you're having 1, your neighbor has to have 3. But why? The replacement rate. Why should we replace the population? There's really only one reason. Money. You can't have economic growth without more workers. I'm reading from the article. Where will a nation's economic growth come from if companies cannot recruit enough workers? And how can a smaller workforce afford to pay for the pensions of them? That was the next thing I was going to mention, the pensions. Afford to pay for the pensions of a much larger retired population. How can a smaller workforce afford to pay for the pensions of a much larger retired population? These are questions that make government economists wince. Yeah, they make me wince too because they are so short-sighted. This is a running theme with me, if you know me at all. This is putting our current system in a position of superiority over everything else. It's like neoliberal economics is a religion to these people that can't be touched. The answer is actually very simple. We just have to change the way we produce and distribute goods and services. The current capitalist system has only been around for a blip in time relative to human history. It's not the last and final and only system possible. If we just reconfigured our economics to be based on cooperation and mutual aid and universal basic income, to each according to their need, from each according to their ability, basic tenets of people over profits economics, then yeah, populations should drop. Why in the world do we want more people and more products and more economic growth? Because it only means more CO2 in the air. It just means trouble. Yes, our population should drop. This is not a problem. And nowhere in this article, well, I shouldn't say. I'm looking, I'm scanning. No. No, I'm not finding anybody taking my point of view. Again, I stand alone. Are you with me? Are you? I would love to know. Drop me a line. Tell me that you and I at least are together on this. Yeah, falling birth rates should not be a problem. Recruiting workers. Read David Graeber's Bullshit Jobs about how things have been turned on their head and the economy doesn't serve us. We serve the economy. Well, it has to grow. We have to have more jobs. Yeah. This makes me nuts. How can countries deal with falling birth rates? Embrace it. Be happy. All nations should have falling birth rates. The population should remain stagnant or drop. It'll be healthier for everybody. And if that does happen, you're right. We can't have the current system. You're right. If we rely on how we operate currently, you're right. We're not going to have enough workers to fill all the bullshit jobs. And we're not going to have enough people to pay the pensions for the older folks. But you know what? That's a bad system. It always has been. Or it certainly has been in what's so-called late-stage capitalism. For my money, it's always been bad, looking at the history of it. But that's not the point right now. The point right now is that it's currently kind of a doomsday for us and the planet. Continued growth, continued reliance on bullshit jobs, one generation having to support the older generation while it's trying to raise their own kids. It's so screwed up. And nobody can see it because everybody is absolutely married to the current economic way of doing things. They see it as a religion and they can't even imagine another way of operating. No money, no money, no money, no money. Here's another one. I'll give you another one. Another reason that we have to get rid of the money profit system. And we have to move to basic social anarchism based on mutual aid, based on cooperation. Profits have to be something that we only learn about in history books. I could give you 20 examples every time we talk. Here's one from Reuters. Congo lawyers say they have new evidence on Apple's minerals supply chain. Basically, what's happening here, Democratic Republic of Congo said this week they have new evidence gathered from whistleblowers that Apple is sourcing minerals from conflict areas in eastern Congo. In a statement, the lawyers urged Apple to answer questions about its supply chain in the country and said they were evaluating legal options. Apple did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment. Bottom line here, the Congo, of course, is one of just a handful of places on Earth that have the kind of minerals needed for modern computers, for batteries, for electric vehicles, all that sort of thing. There are a few places on Earth, and Congo is one of them. And as a result, the working conditions, if there's ever any kind of political or military unrest in these places, Western corporations then have to rely on these places, and it's the oldest story in the world of, basic exploitation of colonies. It's a modern version of imperialist colonialism that the corporations get their hands on these countries and exploit them and exploit their people. And we could get into a whole long thing about the working conditions and the way that minerals are extracted from this planet in order to have our devices and our car batteries. It just can't continue. Well, it can, but we'll have continued deaths and violence and exploitation, and that's the world we live in. And again, our current economic system absolutely depends on it. We can't have the world we have without this kind of problem. And this is why I'm not a Republican or a Democrat in this particular nation, because Republicans are fine with it. They just literally don't care. And Democrats are almost as bad. They pretend they care, but you know what? Well, we've got to have our stuff. So Democrats usually say the right thing, and maybe some of them believe it. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they really think that good foreign policy and regulation can solve these problems, and we can maintain infinite economic growth. We can have all of our toys and devices, and somehow, through some miracle of international diplomacy and international regulations and rights, that these workers can be treated fairly and not be exploited and not be killed and injured on the job. And do they believe this? I think a lot of Democrats believe that's true. I think most of them are just intentionally shutting that down in their brains, and they're just pretending it doesn't exist, which is what we all do. And really, these kind of stories come down to us. We can't continue to pretend that our lavish lifestyle, and don't yell, because it is lavish compared to most people in the world. United States, Western Europe, a couple of other places, Japan, Australia, there are certain nations in this world that do have absolute luxury compared to the global working class, mostly in the southern hemisphere. So, yeah, we can't continue to grow. We can't have rising birth rates and more people and more stuff and more manufacturing, more economic activity, more economic growth. It all has to come down. Population should come down. Economic growth should come down. Well, what's going to happen to my life? You know what? And here's the kicker, and you and I have talked about this in the past. Your life's actually going to get better. We can't have so much stuff anymore. It's killing us. If we could minimize the complete oversaturation of stuff in our lives, they would be better. Here's another one. The cloud. Oh my God, the cloud. The greatest propaganda phrase in propaganda ever spewed. It makes us think that all this computing literally is just happening in the ether, just in the cloud. It's happening up in the sky or something. I think a lot of people remember. I can't remember the legislator who said this. There was a guy in Congress, and he was a Republican, and he was a conservative, so everybody wanted to jump on him. And he said, well, that's what the internet is. It's all these wires and tubes. And everybody laughed at him. Well, what is the internet if not wires and tubes? Of course it is. There's a physical component to all of this. And I bring this up because of another article I saw just in the last day or two on AP. Artificial intelligence technology behind ChatGPT was built in Iowa. Yeah, that's right. The technology has to be built. It's a physical thing. And it was built in Iowa with a lot of water. And that's what this article is about. Des Moines, Iowa, the cost of building an artificial intelligence product like ChatGPT can be hard to measure. But one thing Microsoft-backed OpenAI needed for its technology was plenty of water, pulled from the watershed of the Raccoon and Des Moines rivers in central Iowa to cool a powerful supercomputer as it helped teach its AI systems how to mimic human writing. So of all the issues we can talk about with AI, and it's a big issue, right? Here's one I bet you didn't think of. It's taking an inordinate amount of water from the state of Iowa. As they race to capitalize on a craze for generative AI, leading tech developers, including Microsoft, OpenAI, and Google, have acknowledged that growing demand for their AI tools carries hefty costs, from expensive semiconductors to an increase in water consumption. But they're often secretive about the specifics. Few people in Iowa knew about its status as a birthplace of OpenAI's most advanced large language model. Top Microsoft executive said in a speech it was literally made next to cornfields west of Des Moines. So this is something that we just really don't think of at all. But this is just central to who we are and who we should be becoming. We know about the enormous amount of power needed to mine Bitcoin, which I won't even pretend to understand. I've tried and I can't. But I do know this, just from reading reputable journalism on it. It takes a hell of a lot of power. So the mining of Bitcoin is contributing to CO2 emissions, as is the airline industry, as is even something as innocuous as streaming. Streaming video, streaming music is incredibly energy intensive. We're We're just speeding down the track in this runaway train of technology and convenience. We haven't even talked about the electric vehicles and the absolute ridiculous energy consumption and CO2 emissions that result from the manufacturing of EVs. Sure, an EV is better than a combustion engine. Of course it is. But we're missing the point. All of this points to the fact that we have to become modern Luddites. The Luddites, over the years, have been disparaged and have been defined by their enemies as people who fear advanced technology and fear modernity. And no. The real story of the Luddites is that they saw the writing on the wall, that the overuse, and the rapid advancement of technologies of their time were exploiting workers and leaving people sick and poor and dead, which is exactly what's happening right now. It's been happening since then continuously with every new advance. And it's all because we rely on money and profit. It's all about the profit. None of this would be a problem if we converted to social anarchism based on mutual aid and cooperation. You got to change the laws. You got to change the way we work. Now, you might argue that this works for some people, and I would totally agree with you. Yes, it does. It works for about half of this country. That's a lot of people. What's our population now? 330 million? Do I remember that correctly? So let's be generous. Let's say it works for 200 million people. That's pretty good. You know what? But the other 130 are screwed. And it works for another, 100 million people or so or more in Europe and Japan and Australia. A lot of people are doing just fine. They're doing just great. But how long can we turn our backs on 100 million people in our own country and hundreds of millions of people in the global south, hundreds of millions of people in places like the Congo who are exploited, hundreds of millions of people who are going to be forced to be climate refugees because their island nations are sinking or because it's gotten too hot? Everything we're doing is wrong. And each and every one of us has to take responsibility for how we benefit from this very, very bad and outdated system. Systems change. In the long history of humans on this planet, systems change over time. The fact that people are locked in to neoliberal Western capitalism as it currently stands, to be locked into that idea is to defy history, to defy logic, and to deny your children's and their children's future. Not to mention the current status of the hundreds of millions of people I just mentioned: exploited workers, climate refugees, victims of war, victims of famine, poverty, drought. All victims not of just bad luck, living in the wrong place, not victims of their own devices because they don't think positive thoughts. They don't manifest positivity into the world with their positive thinking. No. These are very real and very practical applications of a system that currently only works for a portion of the world's population. If you're in that portion, well, congratulations. You got a choice. You can take responsibility and understand that you're standing on their shoulders. You're standing on their graves. You're standing on their deathbeds. You're standing on exploited people. And the beautiful part about this is, I kind of touched on it earlier, I alluded to it, and we'll have to do a whole program about this sometime. If and when we acknowledge this relationship of exploitation and we shift it and we change it, I'm going to say, yes, we're going to have a lot fewer people. Population rates will come down, and that will be a good thing. We'll have more time to take care of each other. People in their midlife who need to take care of elderly parents, or people in their young adult lives who need to take care of their young children. You'll be better able to do that. The occupations that really matter, health workers, caregivers, teachers, firefighters, the people that really matter, the people who grow our food and clean and distribute and, all that whole chain. The things we need, artists, poets, storytellers. And yes, manufacturing, of course, that we need physical things. But come on, be honest. The mountains of physical garbage that we produce and we toss every day of the year? In a world of mutual aid and cooperation where profit is only in the history books, your life will be better. Will you have less stuff? Yeah, probably. All these devices, and you have to have a smart refrigerator that talks to you. No. You know what? All the junk, all the devices, all the toys, I guarantee you're going to be happier without them. You're going to be more attached to your own soul. You're going to be more attached to your neighbors, the people around you, your family. You're going to have time for them. We can't continue to live like this. It's insane. It's just insane. Wealthy people, wealthy countries, poor countries, wealthy countries exploiting poor countries. I saw a story this week where the whole big worldwide movement of rich countries donating to poor countries to help fight climate change, because they're the victims, of course. These huge sums of money, much of it is going in the form of loans. So rather than actually helping poorer countries, the richer countries, i.e. U.S., Europe, are giving this money in the form of loans. And we've become loan sharks, basically. We've created a debt in developing countries that they'll never be able to pay back. We got to do this. We got to do this. We got to make the change. All right. Lots I didn't get to kind of the big headlines, the daily news. There's plenty of time for that next week. By the time we talk next week, will we have a verdict in the Trump trial? Maybe. Probably not, but maybe. All right. Plenty to talk about next week, and visit me online and Facebook. I'm always sharing ideas on Facebook. Go to the website, charlespurcell.com, for this episode and all the others in the podcast family. Or this can be heard wherever you find your podcasts. Write to me, charlespurcell at Gmail. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Thanks to Peter Donalds, who wrote and performed our theme song. All right, there it is. Talk to you next week.